everyone. Welcome to Mindset Nebula. I'm your host, Jelena Perfiljeva. Today with me, I have very many great guests. I have our repeated guest, Ashwin Dutt, who is a developer from Mindset from India. Say hi, Ashwin.
Hi everyone, good morning, good evening.
And we have Matthew High, or Matt High, was from Mindset today. Matt, I will let you introduce yourself. Matt is the first time guest on our podcast.
Yep. So I'm been with Mindset here a little more than 3 months now. I'm a FICO architect directly with Mindset. Great to be here.
Welcome, Matt. And we have another first-time guest today with us. It's Mike Berg. He's a developer, SAP developer with Mindset.
Hi, everybody. I've been with Mindset for 5 years now and in the ABAP development realm for 22 years as of this month.
Wow. And welcome back, Dan Flesher is with us. He's a UX design lead at Mindset.
Hi there, everybody. Excited to be back.
And my co-host today is our famous Ethan Jewett, who is a great SAP mentor and an architect here at Mindset.
Everybody, thanks, Jelena.
Everyone. So we have a really great, I think, subject for conversation today. We want to talk about different career paths in SAP world specifically and in IT, and Dan can talk to us about design and other areas. We frequently have these types of conversations with different generations of our colleagues. Our younger generation is obviously they're either at the beginning of their career, and some of them might be reaching the crossroads where they need to make decision which way they want to go. At the same time, someone who has been in the industry for a while, they might also be dealing with their own unique challenges. How do they progress their career or kind of start moving towards retirement? So I think that's just a great subject of conversation, and I'm really glad that we have different people representing different areas of SAP world and different generations here. So I just to start, I just would like to ask everyone to maybe briefly talk what is your own, where are you at your own career path? What are you thinking of today? What challenges are you facing? Well, let's just go maybe around the room. Ashwin, do you want to tell where are you right now?
Yeah, sure. I think once people spend considerable amount of time in IT, regardless of their discipline, so we will reach a point where we have to make, a call where I should go. Should I take a managerial path, or will I have to stay as a technical person? I'm not sure if I am already there yet to make that decision, but I think besides my regular role, I am already doing some trial runs of being a manager, and I see there is already change in the way I look at things, change in perspective already, and it's not easy. Both requires different skill set strengths. I would like to hear more from all of you, because I'm sure you would have already crossed this path and made a decision how you would like to build your career. um, I would like to hear more from you, all of you.
So do I. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the SAP space for the past 14 years. After I graduated college, I started in the business and doing a lot more of cost accounting from that standpoint for the first 2.5 years. And then I actually moved into IT to do my first SAP implementation with a large general aviation company at the time. And then I spent 3 years after that doing consulting work, basically within SAP FICO, and primarily for the client I was working with at the time was actually SAP BPC, but it actually worked out well because of the ECC experience, as well as BPC. All the interface work, I actually facilitated a lot of that. So it was a really easy transition there. And for the last 5 years before coming to Mindset, I was hired with a large tier 1 aerospace firm based in Wichita, Kansas, doing originally solution architecture, and then kind of progressed into really the management role. So I kind of oversaw really the FICO functional roles, and then looking at from a strategy standpoint, that then ultimately led to owning all of the SAP Center of Excellence, both the functional and technical side, as well as strategy. So kind of got a breadth of different flavors, both on the functional side, as well as kind of a progression towards managing both in areas that I was obviously well adept in, into areas that I hadn't necessarily had any experience towards, and really learned a lot there. In addition to that, there was a couple other areas that really were of note. One was kind of managing third parties that we had contracted through, as well as the contract that we had with SAP and facilitating that as well.
So yeah, it looks like an interesting combination of all the different kind of responsibilities.
Yep.
Mike, do you want to tell us about where are you at in your kind of road?
Sure. So I love being a software developer. I wanted to be a software developer ever since I was a child, and my parents brought home I'll date myself a little bit here, but they brought home a Commodore 64 for one of my siblings when he was in college, and I used to program that. And so it was a very easy transition. I knew exactly what I wanted to major in when I went to college, knew exactly what I wanted to do. So it was a really simple decision for me. In my past, I have been offered management positions on multiple occasions. After I turned the first one down, I have to admit I kicked myself a little bit. Ended up being, little did I know it was the correct choice, even though it didn't feel like it at the time. Knowing what my passions are and what I am driven to do, definitely the technical path is the right path for me.
That's great story, Mike. It's always interesting to meet, passionate developers who knew early on. It kind of resonates with my own experience as well, because I really developed interest very early in my school years. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, so I guess I am a new manager. So I've been in my role maybe for about the past 7 months in terms of people management. I guess there are other kinds of management, right? And so in other parts of it, I've sort of managed our design solutions for several years now. I think an interesting switch when you sort of go towards maybe a manager role is it sort of feels like your peer group changes. So when you're in the actual like craft of design, call it, or I think it'd be even true in development, your peers are other developers or other designers or other, I think that applies generally. And then it feels like when you become a manager, your peers are other managers or other, like they maybe even aren't in your discipline. Like I would say, Ethan and I have somewhat similar roles within Mindset. So it's instead of, if I want to talk to someone about something going on in my role, I'm less likely to maybe to talk to a designer and more likely to ping Ethan and say, Ethan, how are you handling this, or something similar with people that you manage. So it's an interesting change for me now because I'm in consulting, I still have that individual contributor role. So yeah, I think actually in consulting, a lot of times you don't go one way or the other exactly. It's like
Mhm.
you still might end up in a blended situation. But for me, we'll see as things grow over time. If I go back to one way or the other or whatnot. Maybe jury's still out on exactly what I want to do, because I do find sometimes you miss the thing you were doing all the time. If you go to management, you might miss that development work, or you might miss that design work a little bit. And both are rewarding, but yeah. So I've played both roles, and maybe I'd still say that I'm still figuring out as we go.
Yeah,
The journey.
I've heard it many times from the managers who used to work in IT, either development or maybe infrastructure roles, that they miss actually doing some hands-on work, and they sometimes even enjoy jumping in to solve some complex issue, and they say, "Yeah, it feels good, to do something finally." So
Yeah.
last but not least, really curious to hear from Ethan, because he's, I think, in a very unique position rather at Mindset here, is that I think he's very successfully combining very technology oriented role with I think more of a management lately. Is that right, Ethan?
Yeah, although it sounds like you're going to go last, Jelena. So,
Okay.
so I'll hand it off to you at the end. But yeah, I mean, I think if I look back at my career, which I've been doing consulting for about 16 years, I think, in some form.
Wow.
And it's pretty much always been consulting, and that makes your kind of career path, so to speak, look like a snarl of yarn or something like that. You jump from thing to thing and do something different each time. I think in 2009, I was promoted to manager of nothing in my first consulting company. But in different roles as a consultant, you have sort of that kind of responsibility. Like you're a team lead, or you're responsible for delivering a project, or you have some more junior consultants who are working with you, who you're responsible for bringing along and kind of showing the ropes. In terms of mindset, Dan and I are in a pretty similar position in terms of timing, where we each kind of took on having a team at about the same time, when we changed the way that we laid out the company a little bit, and aligned some of the people management with the solutions. And that's been really interesting. I think it's been like the direct people management thing is a change and a different way of approaching some of the same problems that have popped up from time to time throughout my career with leading smaller teams or that kind of thing. So yeah, really interested in diving into that a little bit more. Also very interested to hear what your career path and experience looks like.
I was sneakily trying to kind of wiggle my way out.
Hosts get out of this in the Mindset Nebula.
Good call. So yeah, I would say I'm very similar to Mike, except I wasn't actually offered management positions, at least not officially. I feel like just usurp power sometimes, kind of organically. If no one steps in, then I just feel like if there is some kind of leadership spot that is clearly unfilled, I just happen to step in there, whether others appreciate that or not. But in general, when I was just at the very, very beginning of my career, when I finished university, and I was just I was working with a great team at a great institution at our university, and I was just looking at what's going on in that organization and what are others doing. I really wanted to be like the director of that organization. I thought that one day I will be in that office sitting there and very important. But over time, I really let go of that. I wouldn't say dream, but of that goal probably, because I just felt that would have been really great mistake for me to do. generally, I just don't really like working with people, to be honest. And I think I wouldn't make a really great manager with that handicap. And I think it's better be a good developer than lousy manager. So no matter what your age is or what what you're doing. So yeah. So yeah, now that we've heard of everyone, really interesting stories, and there is a lot I think to explore. But I just want to ask. Does any of you do you have any regrets that you haven't made different decisions, or maybe otherwise you feel like that some decision was fortunate, like Michael already mentioned he's happy that he didn't go into management. What are your thoughts about that and experiences?
I can expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I
go ahead.
didn't want to get into too many details during an intro, but what happened with me was I was in my mid-20s and I was offered a management job, and literally the first thing I was going to have to do on my first day as a manager was fire somebody who was actually a friend of mine.
Ooh.
And I didn't want to step into that situation, and so that's what made me turn it down. And then realizing, or thinking at least a few years later, that was a mistake, I tried again with the same company to get into management. And at that point, there were other candidates that had shown up that had experience, and so I was never actually bypassed. They ended up having multiple kind of team leads versus having a manager. I think they did it to not offend anybody, but that's neither here nor there. But what I learned later on is that it was definitely, like I'd mentioned before, it was definitely a benefit to me because of what my passion is and what I consider myself good at. And then also experiencing some managers along my way that I've reported to that were extremely good, what I would call people managers. Versus a taskmaster or something like that, where they could really help you with your career development, and even if and really coach you along the way, and be able to kind of, I would say I had a goal, and it might be, okay, I'll just say I wanted to be the CTO of a company. Well, being a day-to-day developer, I'm not going to get there, and they would help me layer what I wanted to do to get to what my goals were, and just kind of peel back those layers and break out a plan. And I realized that maybe I could have developed that over time, but I definitely did not have that skill set. And seeing how beneficial that was to me and the other people that were on these managers' teams, definitely realized that was not the job for me.
So I'm curious about you, Dan and Ethan. Do you ever have any regrets moving more into management? Do you maybe, I don't know, like or dislike any specific aspects of that responsibility?
So I can definitely share that there are aspects that I enjoy, and there are definitely aspects I don't. So I think one thing, right, coming from the practice of a thing to managing a thing is how the language changes. So instead of sometimes always talking about design, I'm now talking about revenue and utilization and forecasts and opportunities. And so the stuff that you kind of have to care about definitely changes. And I think that's a big switch. I can say that I do enjoy the people management side. I like talking to people about the goals they have for themselves. One of my favorite roles in doing design is being a facilitator. And I think that good people leadership, you can kind of do that in a facilitative way, not in a commanding or, you tell me something and I'll immediately just tell you the right path, but more work in a reflective mirroring, kind of just help people talk through things and offer advice and figure it out as you go. So I do like that aspect of people management. The one thing I'm really curious about is I don't know that I've gotten feedback on how I am as a manager yet in that regard, and I don't know where that's going to come from. I actually just thought of that on the podcast, and I'm like, I mean, when you're doing design or technical work, I think it's those kinds of things, it's easy to get feedback on, yeah, your code is up to snuff, or here's ways that you can improve, or things like that. But I don't know, I probably can't just ask all of my direct reports how I'm doing as a manager. It's hard to have an honest conversation that way. And so I don't know, I'll be curious how growth works in management. Like, how do you get better at that when I feel like it's maybe harder to get feedback or very objective feedback on how you're doing? So I think that'll be an interesting aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. It's very difficult, I bet, for managers to get any input from people who they supervise. Many people would not be comfortable volunteering this information, but I wonder if it actually makes a great manager when people are more comfortable talking to them about how they manage, about how they do their job. Because if it's someone who I'm really not comfortable sharing with, that's probably one of the first signs that they might not be a great manager, actually. So so watch out that if no one tells you anything, about your management skills, you might be in trouble.
The wheels are
Yeah.
turning.
Maybe no news isn't good news. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, there, I think I've heard a lot of words that I think are really interesting. One thing that I really try to keep separate in my mind is management and leadership. And I really don't think that, there are managers who are leaders, right? But I don't think that those things are really very connected.
Definitely not always.
People who just are like, doing work on, individual contributors can lead through example. And there are also like company leaders who aren't really managers, who don't really have direct reports, but are responsible for leading the company in particular directions. And I think those are really, really important roles and important skills that are different from being an individual contributor and different from being a manager. It seems to me, I don't really know all that much about it. I kind of am trying to be in beginner's mind mode. But that management really is about working with people and about trying to do our best to help people get where they want to be and be happy in their jobs, and help the organization grow and take care of the people in it, and make sure that people are productively and happily, hopefully, part of the organization. And so I think that kind of needs to be where the focus is, and that has to be very relational, I think, most of the time. So that's where I'm at right now, kind of, but I'm very much sort of still reading a lot and trying to understand different approaches to that profession, I guess. Curious what Matt has to say about this.
No, so it's funny. I'm sitting there thinking about that, and when I was a manager for several years, one of my favorite pictures was the point of the difference between being a manager and a leader, right? And the manager, and it was an ancient Greek kind of photo, and I'd love to share it here. It'd take me some time to find it, but it was kind of this ancient Greek, almost kind of like image where the manager is basically sitting at a desk, right, and his people out in front of him, right? And then below, the leader is same photo, but the manager is out in front pulling the people in front of him where they want to go. And as a manager, my focus was always really around, one, separating myself from being the traditional manager that just checks off the box, because that doesn't do me or my team any good, right? Because it doesn't move us forward. It basically just says we did everything we were supposed to do, performance evaluations, what have you. It's just checking off that box. How do we progress as a team? Because we live or die being a team, because that's what we are. How do we facilitate that going forward? That was always my position with my teams that I managed, and the other thing too is I had to have unequivocal trust with every one of them. Early in my career, I had to deal with managers that were, plenty of micromanaging. And my stance is I do not want to be like that. The teams that I had, I wanted to make sure that I trust them, that I knew they do the job, right? And really my role for them as an individual was to clear the roadblocks, right? So especially from the client standpoint, when you talk about lots of hierarchical layers within the management structure, not only do I have those below me, but I'm also dealing with those above me. And so how do I clear the path for those that work for me so that they can move forward with those that are asking me, questions from the top down? So it's almost like a balancing act, trying to facilitate that, and I always made it clear with my team, kind of going back to the point, Ethan, you were talking about, honest feedback. Is every one-on-one session that I had with every one of my employees, I would always ask the question at the end, whatever feedback you want to give me, it doesn't matter. Just tell me what you want to, what you're feeling, where can I do better? What can I do to help you more? What can I do to help you grow? And, that was really, in my opinion, a lot to help spur the relationship that I had with them, to trust them and for them to trust me as far as doing the right thing for them to get the job done. And I think a lot of it is, with individuals coming into management, it's easy when somebody comes in to manage a group where they know the subject and they know the topic. It's tough when you get managers that are in there where the employees almost feel like they have to train the manager to be a manager. So, at least in my experience, I think where my employees were very thankful is that they did not have to train me to facilitate this role to help them in their career progression.
It's funny, Matt, you mentioned that kind of checkbox checking type of managers. And I had unfortunately experience with someone exactly like that. And it's our team basically called that person the checkbox checker. But I'm wondering, how do people like that who really, I don't know, I would say maybe possibly not even qualified, or at minimum not exactly passionate or knowledgeable about management as a profession, essentially, how do they end up in management? Is it just out of necessity? They just ran out of, they reached certain point where they have just nowhere to go but to move to management, or just move out, leave the company? Or is that maybe they are just have different vision of how management works? Why essentially, why do we have bad managers?
Well, I think to that point, and forgive me for saying it, I think that's why the Peter principle exists, right? Where you get promoted to a level at which you're most incompetent at, right? and unfortunately, that's all over the place. I think for a lot of organizations, it may seem easy. I think in some respects, they consider it a natural progression. But I think where they miss the boat a lot of times is to ask the hard questions, to say, is this the right progression both for the organization and the individual to actually move to that level? And I don't think that question is asked enough. I think from that standpoint, it's just easy just to go ahead and do it, without thinking about any type of ramifications that are either short-term or even long-term. Because I've worked for plenty of managers that have been managers for a long time, and the feedback that I got for people that had worked for these individuals 10, 15, 20 years prior is nothing changed with them. So it's really trying to understand where you want to be as a manager, right? And obviously it's people focused first and foremost. I mean, that's the first rule. And that's the thing that can't be lost sight on. One of my stringent rules as being a manager is I fight for my people day in and day out, unequivocally. If you're wrong, you're wrong, and we'll have that discussion. But I don't stop fighting for you, because at the end of the day, I hope that we're aligned on where we want to move to go forward. Not only in the work that we're doing, but in your career progression as well.
I think maybe one thing too, how you could end up with bad management is I don't know if people see that as like a skill they can grow as much as you see like technical skills or, learning new things about SAP modules. Like it's easy to understand how to grow in those things. You read the book, you read the blogs, you learn some examples, you practice some code or some design cases, and you can sort of grow that. I feel like leadership and management might be thought of as like a natural skill that people have or don't have. And so if you get promoted to a management position, you might not think that that's a skill you have to continue to learn and grow the way that you were trying to grow when you were, more doing the thing before managing the thing. Again, I think it probably applies to a lot of disciplines, but I think like anything else, like Ethan said, I'm also doing some reading and some trainings around management, right? You can learn new things about that and continue to get better, even if it wasn't necessarily something that came to you super naturally. So I think, for management, I would hope that people, if they end up in that position, remember that there's resources, there's learning, there's ways to skill up in that, even if you don't feel like you take to it immediately and it's the easiest thing in the world for you. I think if it's still something you want to do, you can always get better at it. I just think the scary part is, if you're just trying to get better at a particular skill, maybe you're concerned that your code or your design isn't up to snuff for a particular project. I think if you feel like you're being a crappy manager, you probably feel like you're letting a lot of people down. And so that, I think, can come off worse as then feeling like you're not great at a particular skill. But I think definitely, right, if you want to grow in that space, there's ways to keep getting better. It doesn't have to be just something that's just this natural gift that you do or don't have.
Yeah, I feel like people who are like crappy managers, they tend to blame everyone else but themselves because they're subordinates.
Yeah. I mean, sorry.
No, sorry, Ethan. I was just going to say, for those that are listening, right, if you want to go look up the fable on the 3 letters, I think is a great corollary about, management, right, and, what it takes and what it doesn't take. So go out there, there's plenty of areas to talk about that.
I'm Googling right now. Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything that was said for sure. I think there's another aspect of it though, which is just that I think, if you look around in the world, there are a lot of people who just, I mean, their job's not that important to them, right? It's a job, they do it to make money. Oftentimes there are a lot of people who, for one reason or another, are relatively mediocre at what they do. And that's true for managers, just like for anybody else. There's definitely some like Peter Principle stuff going on, which in my view, at least, is an organizational failing, like that organizations should be putting people into positions that they're prepared to succeed in. And so usually, like if you have an organization that's promoting people to that point, that's a problem that should be addressed at the organizational level. And no doubt there are a lot of companies that are like that. But when it comes down to it, even if you are really good at figuring out who should be a manager, or putting people into the position, or even just doing it randomly, there are going to be a good number of people who just aren't really into it at that time, or just because that's how they approach the job. And I think in general, for a career, whether it's as an individual contributor, a developer, a designer, or if you want to get into management, I think you need to have that conversation about yourself. Is this something that I really want to be doing? Do I really want to be a developer, or am I just kind of paying the bills? And do I really want to be a designer? Do I really want to be a manager? And, not everybody is going to be able to find that thing in their career, but if you can, that's something you really shouldn't pass up. So I think really spending some time thinking about yourself and understanding what you really want. So like, I really like Mike's story where he kind of accidentally made the right decision at first. I mean, not really for the right reason, although what company would put you in that position? I mean, probably it's a warning sign.
Not a great one.
But like, you came to know yourself eventually, Mike, that this is actually just, okay, I'm comfortable with it. It's not something that I want to do. I want to do this thing that I'm really passionate about and really kind of like gets me up in the morning. And that's awesome. So I think that's really the kind of key thing that people should be asking themselves. And you can learn new things, just like Dan was saying. You can learn the skill. If that's something that you think will really motivate you, then more power to you.
Yeah, that's, I think, definitely the most important aspect of making your decisions or career decisions specifically is just looking within yourself and understanding what do you want to achieve. Many times people ask for advice, specifically in SAP space, and you would see someone posting, oh, I have like 8 years of experience doing SAP MM or ABAP or something. What should I do? And people would jump in, oh, you can learn this, you can learn that, but no one really asks, well, what do you want to do? Maybe you want to be a carpenter, who knows? I mean, maybe you shouldn't even be in this job. So it really depends. And there is nothing wrong with having just a job, to pay the bills and maybe expressing yourself through the hobbies. But that's then again, that's something that you should decide what exactly you want to achieve with that. Yeah, it's a really great point.
Yep. So, like Ethan mentioned, that like I was fortunate enough to, experience how it feels like to be a manager. In my trial runs, um, it's about what is your interest, what motivates you, and what will make you to give 100% commitment, involvement. That's more. Uh, I think we have to sit back and analyze and validate what is that we I like, what are my interest. And like Dan rightly mentioned, even I am in the same spot. I still did not receive any feedback how I am doing as a manager, still awaiting to figure out, am I really doing good. And Matt mentioned the trust, the trust which I am going to build with my team. And when I sit with them and do goal setting, there is a lot of learning. I most of the time I go back and think, looking at my team members, how they are setting goals and how they are visualizing their career, progression. um, so much of learning, and I'm still figuring it out. Um, it's, I think, and Matt rightly mentioned, it's about you just take up and see how it feels, and things will get better slowly.
Yeah, I'm sure, Ashwin, you will have no problem figuring out your path eventually. But I'm curious. So, let's say within SAP space, within SAP ecosystem, what's like long-term career paths are possible for different people? I think that these days we are seeing more of architect roles, and it's sometimes more like a basis person on steroids, as they say. It's a infrastructure related architect. There could be a solution architect, lead developers, like Mike and I, for example. What do you think about just different long-term paths directions in SAP space?
So from my experience, at least the last 2 to 3 years, I was helping facilitate with another gentleman, another manager, our internship program. And one of the things that, I kind of learned in my career is I hold a bachelor's of business administration and accounting from the University of Kansas. And when I walked out with that degree, I didn't necessarily want to go the direction that the program really wanted me to go, which was to go at that time really to the big 4 audit firms, right? And it's kind of like, okay, so now what do I do, right? And there's a lot of opportunities out there. And the one thing I learned is taking away from that many years ago and seeing the interns that I would interview going to college visits is, well, what do you guys want to do? And one of the probably the most profound one was I was actually at Kansas State here 2 years ago, and there was a gentleman that came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm getting a bachelor's in computer science, but I'm really interested in human resources." Hold on, wait a minute. You're telling me that you're computer science, but you want to do human resources, because that sounds like success factors right there, first and foremost. And
Bingo.
right. And I'm sitting there almost excited going, that's just such an almost a unique combination that you never hear of, where it's like, whatever you want to do, you can almost write your own ticket for that. But, the one thing I learned, especially from an intern I had here a couple of years ago, was, he was trying to also figure out his career path. And my thing is don't necessarily look at like the traditional aspects, right, of where you think it goes. There's plenty of other things that you might not necessarily think about that will lead you ultimately there. And that's really kind of how, honestly, my career has been facilitated as well, because I haven't necessarily gone a traditional accounting path, right? I've gone the IT, SAP, functional, in FICO, to ultimately, managing, right? And that's been kind of a career progression, right? And it's really, honestly, it's almost from a communication aspect that says, don't worry about what is today. Look at what's potential for tomorrow.
It's great. Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Interesting story.
It always just kind of bugged me a little bit that we have this idea of like a career progression and a career path. And sometimes it's sort of like, well, if you love what you're doing and you're really good at it, why don't you just do that and get better at it, maybe? But why do you have to like move? I mean, that doesn't work for everybody. For me, I would not like that. I know that about myself. I like to move and do different things and that kind of thing. But I don't know why that has to necessarily be baked into the whole concept. And so I think that being baked into the concept causes some problems. So we have these career progressions that are like developer, senior developer, architect, and you look at that and you're kind of like, well, okay, hang on. What does a senior developer do? And what does an architect do? Those are entirely different jobs. Yes, like you do need to have some of the same knowledge for those jobs, but you're doing completely different things. It's just a really different focus. So there are all kinds of examples of that in the business world. And I think as people who are working and who have our own careers and our own professions, we really need to be thinking about that and just reminding ourselves, okay, the career progression that my company has laid out or that my industry has laid out is not what it has to be. So I can go wherever I want to do. I can do whatever I want to do that works for me. And kind of to Matt's point, oftentimes taking a different path is really going to differentiate you and help you find your niche and make it so that you really do have a secure and really fulfilling career.
I kind of, from different conversations, I sometimes suspect there is almost like a stigma even for the people who remain in the same type of position, in the same type of job for a very long time. I don't know, or maybe some people kind of feel boxed in or just not getting anything really great accomplished or done. I don't think that's really true, or it definitely doesn't have to be like that. And that, I think, exactly what pushes some people into management positions incorrectly, because they just feel like, I've been doing this, I just need to do something different. And when they look for, well, what is something different I can do, they really see nothing else but the management path to just kind of to shake things up a little bit. Do you think that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I absolutely agree from that standpoint, especially the company I came from. I mean, there was plenty of individuals that have been there 30, 35, 40 years in the same role. And they absolutely love doing what they did. And they're great people for doing it, and from their standpoint, management really was never a consideration for them. They loved doing the work that they were doing. They were very good at it. They were very skilled at it. I mean, they were considered the expert, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that by any means. And I absolutely agree that there's a stigma that basically says, well, if you're in the same position for X amount of years, then you've got to be able to move from it. And I don't agree with that at all. I think it's to each individual finding what their passion is, what makes them happy. And if it's something that they really enjoy, then by all means, let them flourish and enjoy. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it not only makes them happy, but it makes everything that's downstream from them, from the work aspect, that much easier.
I think one interesting thing too is just, sorry, I'll let you jump back to your point, Mike, in a second, but I think we're in an interesting industry too, where we can't do the same exact thing for 30 or 40 years because everything's changing too quickly underneath us. I don't know if that's true in every other industry, but I mean, UX design and the things you're designing for is not the same in 2021 as it was in 2011 or in like 2007 when the iPhone came out and that kicked off its own resolution. I've got an Oculus Quest here in my office. So, I mean, you can design for VR. I've got all sorts of devices listening to what I'm saying. So you can design for non-interface like chat, conversational interfaces. And, you know, I'd imagine that the same is true in the tech world, right? Even in SAP or even just outside of tech, things are always changing. So even though you've been a developer for 20 years or 25 years, I'd imagine you're probably not doing the same exact thing you did when you started. And if you are, there's a good chance something is wrong. But I mean, it's in this space, things are changing so often that even being in the same role for 10 years, 20 years, it looks completely different. And you're constantly having to learn new things and adjust your skill set. So it's the same, but it's not in a lot of ways.
There's a real value in allowing people to continue doing what they love as well. Little less as a consultant, but if you're working for a company and you've been a developer, you've been a functional person, whatever, and you've been there for 10, 15 years, you know how things were built. You know why things were designed the way they were. You remember the decisions that were made along the way. And then when a new project comes up or something new happens or a problem happens, you know exactly how everything works. And so you can debug or answer those questions very quickly to anybody new that's come into the organization and wasn't a part of those.
Yeah,
that's very old school of you valuing wisdom and experience.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of COBOL that's still out there that still needs to be maintained. You know,
someone's got to write the COBOL. Yeah,
exactly.
that kind of popped into my mind when Dan was saying that like things have to change, and it's kind of like, well, you know, in some areas actually it was a pretty good career decision to just keep writing COBOL. But yeah, it's yeah,
COBOL is on my college transcript.
Oh, you got a job waiting for you at some bank.
So if Social Security runs out, Mike and I are going to come out of retirement to write some COBOL or ABAP or whatever. You know, it's still going to be alive, I'm sure. Yeah. So I feel in general, so just to summarize, if any company, I think, is really want to take advantage of their very diverse human resources or people, as normal as we call them, I think they should really start removing that stigma that comes with developers just doing plain development for a long time. If that's what they really want to do, then let them. Then yeah, maybe don't even invent architect positions just to make it sound. If they want like to have some other name like evangelist or influencer or whatever center of excellence, have them. But yeah, there is no need to push people out of some things that they do really well and what they enjoy. So as we're gonna wrap up soon, as one of the last questions I want to ask. So for someone who is either considering to enter SAP space right now, or someone who just entered and just contemplating their next steps, what advice would you give to that person?
The first thing I would say is, if you're, depending on how much you already know about SAP, reach out to somebody. I mean, it could be even a random person on LinkedIn would, in all likelihood, be willing to have a 5-minute conversation with you about what they do and what their job looks like and kind of what it looks like day to day. Reach out to multiple people because, of course, every organization is different. Every consulting company is different. Just get an idea of what their day-to-day job looks like, what they do to keep their skills up, how they learned, what their path has looked like and where they want to be. And I know it might be a little weird if somebody at random reached out to me, but I would, in all likelihood, I would be more than happy to just set up a Zoom call for a few minutes.
Oh yeah, nice. So Mike, expect your LinkedIn inbox to blow out after this is posted.
I'm sure I'll be connected to this when we post it.
Sweet.
Yeah, and I agree with Mike wholeheartedly. Is, you know, especially with the advent of social media, you know, especially with LinkedIn, you know, for those that would even contemplate it, you know, there are so many groups out there on LinkedIn across many of the different areas that SAP has, both functional and technical, that by all means, you know, go out there, join those communities, start going through those posts, you know. A lot of the things that I've learned over my career, you know, are answers.sap.com, you know, and going through, you know, those that had been through the trials and tribulations before, and really start to immerse yourself in understanding this. You know, it's kind of like what, you know, they prep, you know, college students, especially when they get ready to go enter the job market, around, you know, resume reviews and prepping for interviews, is do research on the companies. You know, in this case here, do plenty of research on the product that you're, you know, you may end up dedicating your life to. You know, I've spent 14 years in here and I still continue day in, day out trying to live that value on what is it that I can learn each day to facilitate that. So for those that are prospective, I agree with Michael wholeheartedly. It's go out there and research as much as you can. You know, no question is a wrong question here. Continue to ask, continue to learn.
Well, I would just very, very slightly disagree about no wrong questions, because I feel sometimes people just ask like it's not, I wouldn't say like basic, but very under-researched questions. Because if you go in and say, what is SAP? Like, I'm thinking about doing career in SAP. So if you haven't even Googled it, if you haven't found even basic information and are not asking more specific questions, I can tell you right away, you're going to have very bad time with an SAP career. Probably not going to be very successful.
That's fair. I was hoping they would at least go and do the research before they ask the question.
Yeah, that's what we usually assume.
Agreed. Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my assumption, but agreed.
Right.
Jelena has spent too much time in the trenches of the old SDN.
Like, Jelena, how many panel interviews have you been part of now?
No, I have PTSD from answers.sap.com.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll hop in. I perhaps a little bit of a broken record, so I'll keep it short. But I do think that probably one of the more overlooked sort of career development skills, and when you're getting into a career and when you're going through a career, is just kind of introspecting a little bit and figuring out, spending some real time figuring out, how am I reacting to this position? How am I reacting to this responsibility? What I'm doing? What does that tell me about where I want to go next? It's great to try new things and say, I think I'm really interested in this, and give it a shot. You'll be wrong sometimes. And the important thing is just to kind of be able to realize that and understand that, and that can be really, I don't know, that can be a really difficult process. I have my own Greek image that, just like Matt's, but mine is just the Socrates head and know yourself, or I think it says know thyself, but it's a translation, so whatever. You can use regular English if you want to.
Who knew if he actually said that?
Yeah, he probably didn't. But Plato just wrote that he said it.
Yep.
So but I think the sentiment is important. That's sort of the basic foundation of whatever you end up doing. And so try to find something that will fulfill you or motivate you or inspire you, and and that you can do a really good job at. If you're feeling like you're doing a mediocre job and you're not inspired, then sure, keep doing the job, but maybe look at some other options or things that you could change.
Nice.
Yeah, I think maybe to add on to that, the nice thing, and this is true in SAP world and outside of SAP, I'd say specific to SAP, there's a lot of cool resources like Open SAP, the training site. Outside of SAP, there's LinkedIn Learning, there's Coursera, there's a lot of free options. There's also like boot camp programs. And so I think barriers are lower than they have been to trying new stuff. And I think if you keep trying new stuff and apply Ethan's introspection to that as you go forward and think of like, okay, what are these things that I'm trying feels right to me? If I take like a coding course, am I really excited? Do I want to keep going? Or am I like, this is kind of boring. I don't know if that's for me. Maybe I'll just try a design course or, whatever else it might be. But there's a lot of resources out there and free platforms, and you can code things, you can design things, you can do a lot with not much investment other than a little bit of time and effort. And so I think leveraging those things, trying new things and feeling what's right and what's wrong, it's sometimes effective to learn what you don't like as much as what you do like. And so, I think in the information age and the internet age, there's a lot of access to resources that you can use to play around and experiment a bit more. And, like I said, applying that, what feels right will, I think, help point you in the right direction when you start to hit on things that you want to do the next course and the next one and keep learning more. That's usually a good sign that you're in the right direction of something that you're going to want to keep learning and growing with.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. And I think many people confuse very different areas of SAP because they hear about, SAP is, fancy and they're well-paid jobs and, maybe somewhat prestigious even, but they don't really understand how many different professions really it includes. And they just think, I'm going to work with SAP. This means I'm going to be high-flying consultant, go into the meetings and check in checkboxes. But then suddenly they find themselves either in ABAP space and not in the fancy new systems. Because beginners are not going to be led, into the new stuff. They are going to be maintaining the whole DCC system when someone else working on something fancy. So it's really important to understand, I think, for all those who want to enter SAP space or just started to understand exactly like what part of SAP you really want to align yourself with, what interests you, and what I think you feel you would like and you would be good with. Ashwin, what about you? I think you already have considerable experience in SAP space to advise someone.
Yeah, I like Dan mentioned, things are changing very rapidly when it comes to SAP. There is a lot of things already. You have a group where you can follow, learn, explore, and always seek advice. I remember, most of the time when I have my connect with Ethan, I seek his inputs. What more I can learn? Based on what skill set I have, and based on my strength, what more I can add on to that, so that I can also explore and learn, um, so that even that will help me to relay the same information to my teammates. When I do goal setting, I can also help them to at least suggest what are the things out there which will be an add-on to their skill set. So I think it's more of you need to seek inputs from the people who is already experienced, and 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 you move on, and you definitely will grow.
Yeah, great. Yeah, definitely talk to someone who knows and get their advice. And Mike Berg has already volunteered, so another reminder, please feel free to reach out to Mike and to others at Mindset as well. I feel that everyone here is very friendly and open to advise others all the time. So yeah, I think it was a great conversation, everyone. And I want to thank you all for participating. Any closing words? Anyone wants to add anything before we wrap up? I see Ethan is definitely thinking about something.
Always thinking, Jelena.
Always thinking.
Nothing to say though.
Oh, that's a great advice. Always think, not necessarily say something. So yeah, so just think kind of inwards. Think what are your own desires and goals are. Think what you want to achieve, what you would be good at. Get information, do some research, and I think you will be very successful in whatever career path, or not a path, or a journey, or a walk in the woods, whatever you want to take a part of. So again, thank you very much for all our guests today and hosts. And I hope to see you and hope to have you next time. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks everyone. Keep developing. Thank you.